Hey, Lily and Kate. I just rediscovered one of my favorite books growing up, called Mandy. It's by Julie Andrews Edwards, and it's so much fun that I wanted to share it with you. So it opens up with a house, and there are people in front of the house. Hopefully you can see. I'm sorry it's so dark, but I have to do this on my phone because the webcam on my computer refuses to work. Chapter 1, Spring. On the outskirts of a pretty country village called St. Martin's Green, there stands a large white house called St. Martin's Orphanage. It's been there for many years. An imposing residence, the house has obviously known better days. It has generous, tall windows and large, high-ceilinged rooms. A black wrought iron railing runs around the front and two sides of the property, and the fourth side has a high stone wall to mark the boundary. The grounds, although not extensive, provide enough room at the back for a substantial play area for the children, a kitchen garden, and a modest orchard close to the high stone wall. The front garden is simply an expanse of green lawn and a drive extending from the gate at the road to the main entrance of the house. The orphanage is managed by a board of trustees, but the principal figure around which the institution revolves is its matron, Mrs. Hannah Briddy. A graying elderly woman, she's a widow who's been in charge of St. Martin's ever since the death of her husband some 20 years ago. In her care, she has, on average, 30 girls. Apart from ensuring that they receive as good an education as possible, she oversees the laundry, the food, and the cleaning of the home. She maintains discipline and tries to observe and help each child in a personal way. Her day begins at the first light of dawn, and she's never finished until late in the evening. Most people would buckle under the strain of so much hard work, but this plain, good-natured woman seems unflagging in her energies. And although the home is constantly understaffed and she's underpaid, it's thanks to her devotion that the orphanage has a higher reputation than most other institutions of its kind. Mandy had been there for as long as she could remember. She was a bright 10-year-old with dark hair that felt boyishly straight and short around her sweet face. Since she had no known relatives, the orphanage was her home, her whole world. She had many friends, and she was much loved. Because she'd been at St. Martin's most of her young life, the staff favored her somewhat, and she was given certain privileges and more freedom than the other children. She could be trusted and relied upon. Apart from schooling and a few special duties, Mandy had plenty of time for herself. Basically, she preferred to be alone. She was inventive and quick-witted, but above all, she was a dreamer. Most of the time, she lived in a make-believe world of her own. She loved to read, like somebody I know. She exchanged books at the local library at least once a week. The wonders of Robinson Crusoe and Alice in Wonderland and Gulliver's Travels were very real to her, and offered far more excitement than the reality of her life could ever provide. On Saturday mornings, she helped out at the local grocery store. She was given a small sum of money for her work, and she used it as she pleased. Most of her money was spent on the precious books, and sometimes on paints, crayons, and paper for painting and drawing. Only the younger children at the orphanage attended school on the premises. Mandy, with the other older children, was sent out each day to attend the local school, which was on the other side of the village green. Sometimes, after her classes were finished for the day, she wandered slowly home, enjoying the pleasures of the soft countryside around her. She loved the outdoors and everything to do with nature. More often than not, having first obtained permission from the staff, she would go for a walk by herself. She was rarely lonely at such times. The trees and flowers were very special to her, and she knew the names of most of them by heart. Living in her own dream world as she did, It was never long before she had invented some situation to match her mood, and she was able to occupy herself for hours. But it did not follow that Mandy was completely happy. How could she be? She had neither mother nor father, and not even memories of them to sustain her. She occasionally experienced sad, disturbing feelings. Sometimes she felt an ache inside that would not go away. It seemed then as though her life were very empty. She would cry for no reason at all, seemingly, and it frightened her when she did. She tried to be brave and put away her feelings. Having one of my attacks again, she would think, trying hard not to let other people see her tears. Her attempts to keep busy were mostly an effort to fill her life, so that she had no time to feel disconsolate. But the nagging sadness was persistent, and it would envelop her when she least expected it. As Mandy grew, her longings grew stronger, and sometimes she felt as though she must surely break apart with so much going on inside her. It was as though she were searching for something, though what or where it was she could not say. And here is a picture of a bunny. I hope you can see that. It's a cute bunny. Chapter 2. The high stone wall at the back of the orphanage held a great fascination for Mandy. It was behind the orchard and stretched for miles to either side of it. None of the other children seemed to know or care what lay behind, but Mandy was curious. She speculated for hours, wondering what lay on the other side. By standing on tiptoe, she could glimpse many trees growing thick and strong. There's got to be something splendid over there, she told herself. I just know there's a castle hidden among the trees, and I'll bet a handsome prince lives in it. He's probably very lonely. Sometimes she imagined a forest full of animals that could actually speak to her. Her favorite dream was of a white unicorn that would follow her everywhere, who would lie beside her and put his head on her lap. I would call him Snow, she thought. Her desire to see over the wall became an obsession. She felt that just a glimpse of the other side might reveal what she always seemed to be searching for. She tentatively broached the subject to her friend Ellie, a maid at the orphanage. Ellie, you know the big wall? Mm-hmm. What's on the other side? Oh, heavens, I've no idea. Just more country, I think. Does it belong to anyone? Not that I know. One afternoon, after school, Mandy went to the wall and studied it carefully. At one end, a large apple tree growing on the other side thrust long pink and white blossom branches over into the orchard. Intrigued, Mandy went closer, and upon further examination, she found that a number of the big yellow stones in the wall protruded just far enough for her to gain a precarious foothold. I might just make it to the top, she thought. With luck, I could reach that big branch of the apple tree, and once on it, I could really see for miles and miles. The prospect of such a view was a challenge to Mandy's adventurous nature, and on an impulse, she decided to try it that very second. She took a deep breath and began to climb. She hoped no one would see her. Carefully testing every stone before she put her weight on it, Mandy pulled herself up inch by inch. At one point her fingers fumbled and she clung for a moment, feeling anxious. Then, with a last careful effort, she pulled herself to the top of the wall and threw her arms around the branch of the apple tree. Now looking down, she found the effect quite frightening. The ground seemed a long way away. Wow, I didn't realize I was this high, she thought. The orchard was awash with soft, frothy blossoms. She turned and peered excitedly through the apple branches. An incredible vista was spread out before her, and Mandy drew in her breath with excitement. Here is Mandy. Can you see that with the light? I hope so. If you can't, it's Mandy on top of the wall. She was looking at a whole new world, hundreds of trees stretching as far as the eye could see, most of them with that soft, silvery green trunk and fine textured bark that makes the beech tree so easily recognizable. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in bright patches. The woods were open and clear, not dense at all. It looked wonderfully inviting and explorable. Mandy saw a small footpath leading through the trees and longed to see where it led. "I've come this far. Now if I could just get down the other side," she thought. She saw that the apple tree forked near its base, and it continued to subdivide, giving her numerous climbable branches. The bark felt smooth and soft beneath her hands as she eased herself to the ground. Now to look for my unicorn. She set off along the path, which led into the heart of the woods. She was acutely aware of the blue sky, the heat from the sun, and the wonderful warm smell of earth and moss and flowers. "Surely I'll find my prince's castle in a little while," she murmured. But each new dip and bend in the path revealed only more trees. She was just beginning to feel a keen sense of disappointment when the path suddenly widened, and almost immediately she found herself in an open and sunny clearing. It was quite wide, almost a grassy meadow, and dotted with evergreens. Mandy could hear the sound of running water, but her immediate attention was attracted to the far end of the clearing, where stood a very old and very small cottage. Most of its windows were broken, and the door was ajar. Tiles had slipped off the roof, and the little chimney had a ridiculous tilt to it. It was in a very bad state of repair. "Gosh, I wonder if someone lives there," thought Mandy. "Should I go and see? Ooh, perhaps I'd better not." But her curiosity was stimulated. It certainly looks empty, but there may be someone in there, an old tramp or a witch or an animal. Matron Briddy was always reminding the children never to talk to strangers and to watch out for the unexpected. So Mandy quietly crept closer, keeping well out of sight behind the trees so she wouldn't be detected. She could tell that someone once must have cultivated a garden. There was a low fence, broken in several places, with a little gate. Underneath the trees, or the weeds, she could see the remains of a paved pathway leading to the weathered front door. And there is Mandy in the house. Mandy kept perfectly still, straining her ears for the slightest noise. The gurgling sound of the running water was nearer now, and birds sang in the trees. It was a lovely afternoon. She moved closer and lifted aside the gate, which was hanging by a single hinge. She tiptoed up the path, being careful to avoid a large path of stinging nettles, and tentatively peeked through the doorway. She was looking into a small room. It was completely empty. Mandy breathed a sigh of relief. A staircase seemingly led to another room upstairs. In the back wall were two small doors. An old garden rake lay across the floor. Mandy moved to the stairs, treading carefully on the loose boards. Each step that she took caused little puffs of dust to rise and swirl in the shafts of sunshine that came through the windows. She climbed up into a tiny bedroom. There was no one about, and no furniture here either. The windows in this room were intact, but extremely dirty. Mandy wiped at the glass with her sleeve, and had a splendid view of the meadow and the woods through which she had just traveled. A little brook was visible, too. It splashed and danced along the base of a hillock. It was enchantingly pretty. Downstairs again, and gaining courage with every step, she pushed gently at the first of the two small doors. It swung open, creaking on old hinges. She was in a tiny kitchen. There was a sink in one corner, with a single iron water tap attached to the wall above it. When she turned the tap, drops of rusty liquid dripped out, and a spider scuttled from the drain. There was a cupboard which contained nothing but a few broken bottles and an old tin basin. And there was a back door. Mandy pulled it open. She saw the remains of an old bonfire in the tall grass, and a path leading around to the front of the house. Re-entering through the doorway, she went back to the main room and tried the second small door. This one opened easily at her touch, and as it swung wide, Mandy was totally unprepared for what she saw. To her amazement, she found herself staring at a room which was entirely decorated with seashells. It was absolutely incredible. Lovely shells of every shape and size, and all colors of white and pink and iridescent mother of pearl lined every wall and the ceiling, too. The effect was one of the most beautiful sights Mandy had ever seen. The afternoon light shone softly through a big bay window at the end of the room. Cobwebs hung in silken strands. A pair of old curtains, made of some soft material, moved gently in the breeze coming through the open door. The woodwork and the window and door trimmings were painted gold, and the flooring was of tile or marble. A large fireplace was set into the wall, and the mantelpiece seemed to be of marble, too. How this extraordinary room came to be in this small cottage, so many miles from anywhere, Mandy couldn't begin to imagine, and it was a full minute before she recovered from the surprise of finding it there at all. She moved around, touching the shells and the curtains, and looking into the fireplace. Everything was coated with dust. She wandered outside to the clearing and sat down in the grass, drawing her knees up under her chin. She stared at the little house and garden for a long time. Who could have lived here, she wondered. It can't have been a family, for there's just the one bedroom, and the whole house is hardly big enough. Maybe someone lived here alone. But what kind of person would do that? And did he make the shell room? The discovery of this wonderful place was almost more exciting than finding a castle. The cottage was so charming and quaint. There was a quality about it, an entrancing air. An idea began to take shape in Mandy's mind, and the more she thought about it, the more it appealed to her. What if, Mandy said to herself, what if I pretended this cottage were mine? I could sort of adopt it. Who would know? Who would care? Nobody lives here, I'm sure of that now. And somebody needs to take care of it. And oh, I could take care of it. She sprang to her feet. I could. This place could really be mine, a house of my own. She ran back into the little garden. I could pull all the weeds out of here, and plant flowers, and mend the fence, and make the path tidy. I could sweep and dust inside, and clean the shell room, and wash the curtains in the windows. Oh, little house, she turned to it, I could take such good care of you. Mandy went all through the cottage once more, seeing the rooms from a new perspective. 1,000 thoughts ran through her head. She would have to make a list of all the things she would need. How was she to get them, and from where? She would have to be careful not to let anyone know of this secret place. It would be difficult to come here every day without being seen. She had no idea how late it was until suddenly she realized the sky was darkening with the oncoming night. Heavens, I must get back. Matron will be worried about me. Running across the meadow, Mandy paused briefly for a final look at her newfound delight. The little house was soft white in the gray dusk. I'll be back tomorrow, Mandy whispered to it, and turning, she sped through the woods along the path she had earlier that afternoon followed. She reached the high stone wall and swiftly climbed the old apple tree. Once onto the branch that extended over into the orchard, she eased herself down until she was hanging by her hands, and then lightly dropped to the ground. In a matter of moments she was inside the orphanage and racing up the stairs to her room to wash her face and hands before dinner.